It's Wednesday morning, May 8th, 2020, and this week I'm going to take a much closer look at GAIA GPS. GAIA GPS is a navigation app that I have on my iPad, and I consider it a very essential tool because I use it to explore intelligently. It gives me a lay of the land, it shows me potential routes in the area, what type of land that I'm on, and I also use it to record my tracks and notable waypoints. Generally, there are two types of GPS devices to be used in a dashboard-mounted automotive application. Devices used for guidance and devices used for discovery. And this is a very important distinction because GAIA GPS is the latter, while most GPS devices are the former. They're used for guidance. A GPS that's used for guidance is going to tell you how to get somewhere. It's going to give you visual, turn-based directions, and it's going to tell you how to get to an address or how to arrive at an attraction. GAIA GPS does have some of that functionality, but it is not what it excels at. What GAIA excels at is showing you a wealth of information about your position and the surrounding area while you're exploring. If I need guidance to a place, no matter where it is, I'll use Google Maps on my phone. But if I'm in the backcountry exploring the terrain, then I will use GAIA GPS predominantly. First, let's talk about the device itself. This is the Apple iPad Mini 4. It's a Wi-Fi only model with 128GB capacity, and it's the smallest form factor iPad that's available. There's currently an iPad Mini 5, which is the one you want. It looks identical to this, it's just more powerful. Since it's Wi-Fi only, it does not have a GPS chip, so the iPad alone can't track your location. In order to use a Wi-Fi only iPad as a GPS, you have to have an external device. Editor's note: iPads that are cellular enabled have a GPS chip, and you don't need to subscribe to a cell plan to use the GPS. At one point I had a little dongle here that plugged into the port that offered GPS functionality, but a long time ago I replaced that with my Garmin inReach. So the iPad connects to the Garmin inReach using Bluetooth, and then the Garmin inReach transmits a GPS signal to the iPad. So you can use your iPad navigation apps as if there was a GPS built into the device. I am not familiar with Android devices, but GAIA GPS is available for Android tablets just as well. My only recommendation is to buy large storage capacity as possible. This is 128 gigs, and you can download a lot of extremely heavy base maps on GAIA GPS that can take up a lot of space. Alright, how do I use GAIA GPS? I use it to record waypoints, I use it to record tracks. If the Jeep is moving, I am recording my travels, whether it's on street or in the backcountry. Most of all, I use GAIA GPS to plan my movement in real time, to assess the road ahead, and to see the features of the terrain around me. I never do route planning. Well, I shouldn't say never. I did route planning once as I was traveling through North Maine woods. I wanted to get from the southern point to the northern point on one tank of gas. So at that point, I did have to plan a logical route. But aside from that instance, I'm out there to explore. So if I get to a junction in the road and it looks interesting to the left, but my route tells me to go to the right, I'm going to go left. I want to see what's down that road even if it's a dead end. So I do not plan. Where I choose to go, I would say, is guided 90% by curiosity alone. Now, I mentioned that I record absolutely everything, and I do that for my own reference, and I also make that data available to my Patreon subscribers. If I stop at a Taco Bell, I'll mark a waypoint. If I stumble upon a scenic overlook, I'll mark a waypoint. I record 4 different types of tracks, and I keep this dead simple so I can do it quickly and streamline my workflow. One type of track that's different from the rest is my hiking track, because that's pretty much everything that I do on foot. The remaining 3 tracks are all vehicular, and I name them based on what road surface I'm on. So you have street, which is by far the most common, and that is any paved road surface. Then you have dirt, and this is usually a well-maintained groomed surface that you could take any type of car on. Finally, you have 4x4, and this is any type of primitive two-track or technical surface that demands high clearance and maybe some technical driving. Just because I have a track labeled 4x4 doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be challenging, but it does indicate that the road surface is unmaintained. To help catalog the data, I also name waypoints and tracks based on the region that they were recorded in. So if I stay at a campsite in California, I name the waypoint camp.ca. In Arizona, camp.az. Map layers. This, in my opinion, is what sets Gaia GPS far apart from the competition, the wealth and quality of the map layers that are available. Gaia has its own default topographical map, which is absolutely beautiful, and it just keeps getting better and better over the years. It's a lightweight vector-based map that's not raster, and this means that these aren't static pixels. The lines on the map are rendered in real time, so when you zoom in, it doesn't lose any detail whatsoever. On a raster or pixel-based map, you zoom in, and suddenly the pixels get really large and chunky. That's not the case with the Gaia map. Before you set off on your adventure, you're going to want to download as much map data as you can to your device. When you're out there, you're not going to have internet access anymore. So even though Gaia, when you're connected, pulls down maps in real time, it can't do that when you're off-grid. Now, Gaia manages to pack a ton of detail into their default topographical map in a very, very compact byte size. So right now, I was able to download a huge chunk of the American Southwest just in one sitting. So that's where Gaia's default topographical map shines, in detail and efficiency. Now, not every map layer is perfect. There is always going to be one that has some detail where another does not, and vice versa. And as much as I genuinely love the default topo map, there are a few details that it's lacking. The American Southwest is filled with BLM roads, and these are really just obscure tracks that wander in every which direction. The default topo doesn't seem to show a lot of those, so it helps to have a supplemental map source in that case. Also, every now and then I come across a lake, a stream, or a small body of water that isn't reflected in the default topo map. But the default topo map is brilliant, and it more than makes up for those minor shortcomings. Now, with a Gaia GPS premium subscription, you can stack map layers and overlays and adjust their transparency with a slider. This allows you to completely customize the map viewing experience to show only the data that you want to show. There are a ton of different layers to choose from, but I routinely use 3 or 4 of them. First, I use Gaia's default topographical map as my base. The next one I consider to be absolutely essential, and it alone makes the premium subscription worth it. And that is the public land layer. The public land layer is for the United States, and it puts a colored tint over the type of land that a certain area represents. So BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, is a yellow tint. National forests are a green tint. National parks are a brown tint. And you have federal land as purple, state land as a different shade of purple. And when you live in your vehicle, this is extremely helpful because it shows you what type of land you're on. On BLM land and in national forests, dispersed camping is generally legal. It's allowed. So that's where you want to pop the camper for the night. But if you're just following remote tracks all over the place, it's often impossible to tell if you're on BLM land or national forests unless you go through a main thoroughfare. So with this, if you're driving down the highway and you see a track that wanders off into the desert, you can glance at the map and say, oh, that's color-coded yellow. That's a BLM road. I should go check it out. Now keep in mind, you're going to want to ensure that it's an established track. So BLM roads are often marked by numbered markers at their junctions, and that's the same case with national forest roads. The next most important overlay that I stack on top of the public land layer is the U.S. Forest Service Motor Vehicle Use Map, and that applies only to national forests. While it's always a good idea to stop at a ranger station for an update, the Motor Vehicle Use Map is pretty much gospel when it comes to where it's okay to travel in your four-wheel drive vehicle. There are different road types. There are roads that are open to all vehicles, whether it's an ATV, a side-by-side, a 4x4. There are roads that are open only to street vehicles. There are dirt trails with similar designations and trails open only to 50-inch wide or less vehicles. And the last premium layer that I sometimes use is also for the U.S. Forest Service, National Forests, is the Usfs Roads and Trails overlay. And this is very similar to the Motor Vehicle Use Map, but it is not necessarily motorized. With iPad OS 13, when dark mode became available, which means it inverts the colors to a black background and light foreground, shortly thereafter, Gaia made sure that their default topographical map worked with this functionality, and it looks great. This is a lot less glaring at night, and then during the day, I prefer light mode for better visibility. After freshly installing Gaia GPS, I don't make any changes to settings, except for distance markers and notifications. I turn notifications off because that's just an annoying pop-up that shows whenever you've traveled over a certain interval. But I do turn markers on, and markers will appear as blue dots whenever you travel over a set interval along a track. It really helps me get a feel for distance when I zoom in and out over a map. Gaia GPS is a cloud-based service, so you log onto their website, you create an account, and then you download the app for your devices. So I downloaded it for my iPad, I've got it for my iPhone, and there's also a web interface for your desktop computer. And at the end of every week, I manually sync all of my devices. When you sync a device, it puts all of the latest data on the cloud, and it ensures that data is available and visible on Gaia GPS on all of your devices, including the web. This is handy because if I feel like going on a short hike and I don't feel like taking my bulky iPad with the Garmin in reach, although I always should, I can just take my iPhone instead, and I can record my hike on this. As I mentioned before, Gaia GPS is an exercise in map reading. It's not going to spell out where the destinations are for you. It's going to give you a resource that you can use to make intuitive deductions as to where you might find points of interest. So let's say I'm traveling down a forest road, and up ahead on Gaia GPS I see that there's a forest road spur. And just at a quick glance I see that spur terminates at a high elevation by some contours in the terrain, overlooking a creek in the canyon or the valley. So my first thought is that forest road exists for a reason, and even though it's a dead-end spur, since it stops at the edge of a canyon, it could potentially be a good flat spot, a good place to camp with a nice view. With a little bit more investigation, when I zoom in, I see that there are power lines. So what that tells me, based on intuition, is that this might just be a very utilitarian clear-cut with power lines looming overhead. And even though there might be a flat spot to camp, that's not desirable at all. So I delete the waypoint and I keep looking. And then I find another spur that is about a mile long, 0.8 miles as the crow flies, and it terminates at a marker on my base map called Locust Spring. It looks like it's at a lower elevation in the valley, so this is worth checking out. As a side note, if I have cell service, I'll often use Google Maps and just load up their satellite view to try to get some satellite imagery of the exact same area that I saw on Gaia GPS. Now there's satellite imagery available on Gaia GPS too, but my iPad is usually offline and that is very heavy to download locally to the device. So it's really just a nice to have and very easy to pull up on Google Maps if I happen to have a little bit of cell service. I have to give credit where credit is due. I did say that Gaia isn't going to lead you to adventures and that you're going to need to discover those experiences yourself. That's not entirely true. I don't feel like Gaia is the best tool for the job for that, but the company, the developers, are making a strong effort to ramp up this feature as time goes on. This past year, they introduced a Discover tab in their interface. And you click on that tab, you enter a keyword or a region, and it shows you a list of possible hikes or routes in that area. This is crowdsourced content, and that means that these routes weren't put there by Gaia GPS themselves, but they were submitted by users of Gaia GPS. And the users are able to share pictures and a description of these routes and then give it a star rating, and then you can look at that and decide if that's where you want to go or not. People are using it, there's good data on there, but it's not Gaia GPS's foremost strength, and it feels a little bit rough around the edges. While you can pull up the route on your map and you're able to track yourself on Gaia GPS isn't going to tell you how to get to the route. For that, when you select the hike or the route that you're interested in, you tap on the 3 dots up top and then driving directions, and then it'll load an external program, either Apple Maps or Google Maps, that will give you turn-based directions to get to the start of the trailhead. But that just reinforces my point that if you're looking for a GPS app that tells you how to get somewhere step by step, Gaia GPS is not the tool for you. You're looking for something else entirely. Gaia GPS is not perfect. It's a living, breathing, evolving piece of software. Every time Apple or Android update their operating systems, it might introduce new bugs in Gaia GPS. Conversely, every time Gaia GPS releases a new version, they fix old bugs and new bugs crop up. Any bugs that I've encountered have usually been fairly minor, display bugs. Recently there was a bug where I'd record a track, and then when I was done recording and hit save, the track would disappear from the map, even though it would still be there physically. It's stored in the data. Stuff like that is frustrating, but the pros and the advantages of the software far outweigh those minuscule issues. Now that I've synced all my data from my iPad, I can go to the web interface and interact with it there. So we'll zoom in to a short track that I recorded around town yesterday. I'll click on that, and I can see the stats for the track. Open details page. I can edit the notes, driving around the block. Save notes. And you can see it also shows speed, elevation, distance, moving time, pace. Now it's through the web interface that I usually add my data to folders. And this is important because a folder, not only does it organize, but it also creates a downloadable package of waypoints and tracks. Alright, now we will go into the folders interface. We will take a look at V9E7. And here you can see the folder contains all of my data just for episode V9E7. That was a cumulative distance of 445 miles, and here you can see all the tracks and the waypoints in the folder. Now I want to download that. I want to put that data on my computer so I can share it as a GPX file. So in this green bar up top underneath V9E7, we'll download GPX. We now go to my downloads folder, and there it is, V9E7 GPX. Now I have a program on my Mac called Gpx Editor. I downloaded it from the App Store, and I'll talk about it another time, but basically it lets me edit GPX files on my computer. So I'll load that up, and here you can see what I just pulled down from Gaia GPS. Here's all the tracks, and here are the waypoints. You can see all the camping waypoints are here, and they have descriptions. and there's an assortment of other miscellaneous waypoints. Alright, so that is what my weekly GPX package looks like. Importing a GPX file from Dropbox to Gaia GPS using only a mobile device, in this case my iPhone. Start by opening the Dropbox app, navigate to the folder containing your GPX file. Let's go V6E2. On the V6E2 GPX file, tap on the three dots to the right, export. Now we want to open in, and it does an export thing before I tell it where it's going. Alright, now it asks where do you want to go, so copy to Gaia GPS. All imports complete, so we will go to the saved folder. So we'll go to V6E2 GPX, and there's all the data. Tap the three dots and show on map. And there you have it. The same process would work exactly the same way for my iPad. Android users, I'm sorry I can't demonstrate for you guys. I don't have any of those devices on hand, but I believe it's a very similar process. When I leave the Phoenix area, I'm probably going to head east into Tonto National Forest and then travel through Tonto up into Coconino toward Flagstaff. I have never been on this side of I-17, at least not very much, and you can see there are a ton of forest roads on the motor vehicle use map in Coconino. That's the extent of the planning I do. I'm very much an anti-planner. Obviously, for practicality, you have to make some plans. You might have limited resources or limited time. But I encourage you to keep your adventures as fluid as possible. The best and the most memorable experiences are always the unexpected ones. They're the things that make adventure, adventure.